She was wearing my sweatshirt when I walked in. Not hers, not his, mine. It was the faded green one with the fraying cuffs and coffee stains on the sleeve, the one I wore for 2 weeks straight after Lucas left. I'd thought I lost it at the laundromat. I tore the house apart, even blamed my neighbor's kid for stealing it. But there, it was stretched across Claire's narrow frame like a second skin. And she was barefoot, on my porch, holding his mug, smiling like nothing was broken. That moment, that was the click. Not the heartbreak, not the betrayal, the click. Like a camera shutter in my mind. Like the very first sentence of a book I hadn't realized I'd already started writing. I didn't say anything. I just stood there in the doorway, holding a carton of oat milk and a bottle of Riesling, and felt my world rearrange itself around a single stupid sweatshirt. "You okay?" she asked, like she hadn't stolen the man I'd built my future with. Like she hadn't read my secrets for 20 years and underlined the ones she could use. I wish I could say I slapped her, that I screamed or sobbed or threw the wine like in those made-for-TV movies. But I didn't. I nodded, I walked past her, and I poured myself a glass. Because that's what you do when your ex-fiancé and your best friend decide to become lovers. You drink Riesling at 11 a.m. and pretend it's still your house. They'd only been together a week officially, but unofficially, who knows? I started noticing the shift in Claire months ago. Longer phone calls that ended when I walked in. Jokes they laughed at without explaining. And that one night, when I got home early and found them dancing in the kitchen to Etta James, they said it was innocent. They always say that at first. The thing is, Claire wasn't just my best friend. She was my emergency contact, my maid of honor, the woman who held my hand when my mother died and brought lasagna to my father's wake. We'd slept in the same twin bed on camping trips. She knew the shape of my life better than anyone, even Lucas. And Lucas, he wasn't just a partner. He was supposed to be my beginning again. After 3 failed jobs, 2 miscarriages, and 1 long toxic marriage, I finally found someone who listened to my silence. He wasn't exciting, but he was steady, gentle, kind. Or so I thought. That day, the sweatshirt day, I left the house and drove until I hit the water. The lake had always calmed me, but that afternoon it just stared back still and smug. I rolled the windows down and screamed so loud my throat stung. Not because I lost him, not even because I lost her, but because they took my story. And that's when the first line came to me, like fire. The day my best friend kissed my fiancé was the day I stopped writing about love and started writing about revenge. I opened the notes app on my phone and I began. That was the moment this story, the one you're listening to now, was born. I never meant for it to become a book. But the truth has a way of bleeding through, doesn't it? Even when you try to stitch it back in secret. Especially when the ones you trusted the most were holding the knife. He always said Claire was like a sister to him, and I was naive enough to believe that made me safe. It's funny in a twisted kind of way. The same man who once cupped my face and whispered, "You're the only person I can be quiet with," had also confided in Claire about our fights, my insecurities, even the nights I cried myself to sleep after the miscarriage. He said she helped him understand me better. Now I understand he was rehearsing with her. Claire had been in my life longer than any man ever stayed. We met in junior high when I found her in the girls' bathroom trying to cut her bangs with safety scissors. I told her she looked like a raccoon. She laughed so hard she snorted and called me a bitch. We were inseparable from that moment on. She knew everything: my mother's depression, my father's silence the summer I lost my virginity to a guy who never learned how to spell my name. And I knew her too. Or I thought I did. Her family was loud and chaotic, full of divorce and drama and secrets. She always said I was the calm in her storm. But storms don't love calm, they consume it. And she consumed him, Lucas. I met Lucas through a neighbor's dinner party. He was the kind of man who waited for you to finish your sentence before responding. That felt rare back then. We fell into step quickly. Dates turned to sleepovers, sleepovers turned to drawer space, and drawer space turned into dreams of an October wedding. But he never really laughed at my jokes the way Claire did. And he never really watched me the way Claire did either. They say hindsight is 20/20, but sometimes you don't need hindsight, just honesty. And if I'm honest, I always knew Claire liked Lucas. I just thought it stopped at admiration. It didn't. It kept going behind my back in my kitchen, in the stupid quiet spaces I thought were safe. That summer, Claire was staying with us, just until she figured things out. She'd broken up with Greg, her boyfriend of 6 years, and needed a place to crash. Lucas offered without asking me first. I told myself it was fine. Of course it was fine. She was family. But I started noticing things. Her robe hanging too close to his towel. Wine glasses in the sink I didn't use. A single pair of boxers folded neatly on her side of the laundry basket. Once I came home early from the bookstore and found them rearranging the spice rack together, giggling like teenagers. Lucas looked at me like I'd walked in on a joke I wasn't part of. "Hey, babe," he said casually, like nothing was off. Claire offered me a sheepish smile and said, "We were just organizing your chaos." My chaos. As if the home I built was theirs to redecorate. As if I were just the cluttered backdrop to their blooming intimacy. But I didn't confront them. Not then. Because if you accuse your best friend and your fiancé of something you can't prove, you don't just risk betrayal, you risk humiliation. And I'd been humiliated enough in my life. So I stayed silent. I swallowed the lump in my throat and pretended I didn't notice the way he started quoting her in conversation, the way she started wearing lipstick again. And every night I rolled away from Lucas in bed and told myself the cold came from the air conditioner. Not from us. Now looking back, the betrayal wasn't a moment, it was a series of whispers. A slow erosion. Like watching paint peel from your favorite wall, but blaming the humidity instead of the neglect. Until that day with the sweatshirt. Until I knew. Until I saw. And still I hadn't told a soul. Not my sister, not my therapist, not even the group chat with my college girlfriends. Instead I wrote, late at night under a fake name in a private Google Doc titled Untitled Journal. Each page was a bloodletting. Each sentence was another wound with a label. And then without thinking, I added a chapter title. Then another. And suddenly I wasn't journaling anymore. I was outlining. He left on a Thursday. By Saturday, they were in Paris. I know because Claire posted a picture of the Eiffel Tower with the caption, "Sometimes the heart leads you somewhere it should have gone all along." She didn't tag him, but I could see his reflection in her sunglasses clear as day. Lucas, the man who once said he hated overrated tourist traps, grinning beside the woman who once swore she'd never date another man with too many feelings. There he was, my ex, my almost husband, wearing the jacket I bought him for our 3rd anniversary. And there she was, my best friend, wearing my sweatshirt. There's a kind of pain that makes your chest burn not with rage or even heartbreak, but with shame. It's the shame of having missed the signs, of having offered your whole self to people who were only borrowing space until they found something shinier. He didn't say goodbye. He didn't leave a note. Just a cold, empty closet and a voicemail that started with, "I think we both knew this wasn't working." No, Lucas, I didn't know. What I knew was how I held your hand through your father's chemo. What I knew was how Claire sat beside me the night I took a pregnancy test that read negative again, and we both pretended we weren't relieved. What I didn't know was that the two of them were already choosing a world without me in it. Paris was their way of making it official, loud, public, irrevocable. And me, I was sitting alone in the bathtub with a laptop, a pint of pistachio gelato, and 43 pages of a story I hadn't told anyone I was writing. Until I did. I sent a chapter, the first one raw and unpolished, to an anonymous writers' forum I used to haunt in college. Just to see if anyone would read it. Just to see if the words felt as sharp to someone else as they did to me. The responses were immediate. "This feels like my life." I didn't even know how much I needed to read this. "Please keep going, please." It was like feeding oxygen to a dying flame. Suddenly I was up all night again, not crying over them, but writing through them. I renamed the characters, of course. Gave Claire a different hair color. Made Lucas a teacher instead of a financial analyst. But the bones of it, the betrayal, the secrets, the emotional decay, it was all real. I wrote the forbidden moments I was never meant to witness. The conversations I'd replayed in my head 1,000 times. The exact words he said when he thought I was asleep. "She gets me in a way Maggie never has." I wrote it all, and by the end of the week I had 70,000 words. It wasn't a diary anymore. It was a manuscript, a living, pulsing story of betrayal wrapped in domestic comfort. A tale of best friends, wine nights, borrowed sweaters, and kisses that happened when the world wasn't looking. I titled it Glass Houses because that's what our friendship was. Fragile, beautiful, doomed from the first crack. I didn't expect anything when I uploaded the sample chapters to an indie publishing site. I wasn't a writer, not anymore. Not since I stopped blogging years ago. This was supposed to be therapy. But within days the book caught fire. A small influencer posted about it. Then another. Then a podcast host called it the most brutally honest portrayal of emotional betrayal since Gone Girl, but warmer and more real. And then 2 weeks later I got an email from a publisher. They wanted the rights. They offered a book deal. And the part that still makes me laugh, Claire and Lucas were still in Paris when my face appeared on the trending author list. She took my man. I took her story. I didn't write it to get revenge, but I didn't stop it either. When the emails started flooding in, women mostly all ages telling me how they'd once been the Maggie in their own love triangles, how they'd watched a Claire slink through their lives and leave everything bleeding. I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Power. Not over them, over myself. Because for once I wasn't the silent girl in the background handing out tissues while someone else cried louder. I wasn't the understanding fiancé or the forgiving friend. I wasn't the woman who stepped aside to let things play out. I was the narrator, the storyteller, and the story belonged to me. The publisher wanted a marketing angle, a press release, something bold. I told them the truth. I didn't change the names to protect anyone. I changed the names because I wasn't sure if I was ready to admit what I really knew or how long I'd known it. They asked if it was based on a true story. I said, isn't everything... The week glass houses hit shelves, I got a text from Claire. The first one since the morning she watched me pour myself a glass of wine and pretend her betrayal didn't rip through my spine. Claire, so I guess I'm the villain now. No hello, no apology, no acknowledgement that she hollowed me out and climbed inside. I didn't answer. But if I had, I would have said villains are usually the only ones with interesting dialogue. A few days later, she posted a story on Instagram, her holding the book in front of a mirror, with a caption that said, "When fiction hits a little too close to home." I didn't respond to that either. But I watched the likes roll in. Friends we'd shared. Colleagues from old jobs. Even her ex Greg, who once told me Claire would burn every bridge just to feel the glow on her face. Lucas predictably stayed quiet. But I knew he read it. The book had a chapter called The Mug, where the narrator catches her best friend drinking from her favorite cup barefoot on the porch. And one night around 2 a.m., someone left a 1-star review on Goodreads that said, "This is exaggerated. No one would throw away a relationship over a mug." I clicked on the profile. No picture, no reviews before or after. But I knew. It was him. That was the night I knew I'd won. Not in the childish sense, not like a game, but in the way that survivors win, quietly, permanently, without needing to ask for the trophy. The book sold faster than I imagined. Within 3 weeks, it climbed the charts, small presses at first, then major lists. An influencer called it a masterclass in emotional excavation. Another wrote, "I cried because I saw myself. I gasped because I saw the people I trusted." One woman sent me a message that simply read, "Thank you. I finally left him after reading your book. He was sleeping with my sister." I stared at that message for an hour. Because isn't that what stories do? They don't just tell truths, they unearth them. Rip them out of hiding. Expose the soft rot behind polite smiles and Sunday brunches. Lucas and Claire gave me heartbreak. But heartbreak gave me something better. A voice. And I was just getting started. The day Glass Houses hit #1 on the bestseller list, I didn't tell a soul. Not my sister, not my editor, not even the barista at the coffee shop who always added extra foam because she said I looked like someone with a lot on her mind. I just sat at my kitchen table in silence and stared at the tiny notification on my phone. My name, my real name, next to that little gold #1. It didn't feel triumphant. It felt still, like standing in the middle of a ruined battlefield and realizing you survived, but you don't know what to do with the silence. I should have felt elated. Instead, I felt hollow. Not because I regretted the story. Not because I still missed Lucas. But because the victory didn't bring closure, it just brought echoes. Echoes of what was taken. Echoes of who I had been before everything fell apart. I opened the fridge. Empty. I hadn't shopped in days. I put on my coat. No bra. Just the same black hoodie I wore for most of that miserable winter. The one with the frayed sleeve and the inside pocket that always caught loose change. At the grocery store, I passed the magazine rack. And there it was. Me. Or rather, a version of me. A pulled headshot from a blog I hadn't updated in years. Above it, the headline, "Divorce, Betrayal, and Book Deals. How One Woman Turned Her Ex's Affair into Gold." Gold. Funny word for grief. In line, I caught someone whispering. A woman in her early 30s holding a copy of my book like it was sacred. "That's her," she whispered to her friend. "That's Maggie Holloway." I didn't turn around. I didn't say thank you. I just paid for my oat milk and strawberries and walked out into the gray rain. That's the thing about being turned into a story, you don't own the interpretation. You hand over your bleeding parts and people decide whether to call it bravery or bitterness. Some called me empowering. Others called me petty. A few called me a liar. But none of them knew what it was like to watch the people you love choose each other while stepping over your body like a doormat. None of them knew what it meant when Claire texted me again this time, with nothing but a link. I clicked it. It was a podcast interview. The truth behind glass houses, Claire tells her side. I nearly dropped my phone. There she was, my former best friend, sitting across from a podcast host who nodded too much, smiling like a martyr. I didn't steal anyone, she said. People don't belong to other people. Lucas and I, we just found each other at the right time. And Maggie, I love her, but she has a flair for drama. Always did. Flair for drama. It felt like being slapped with glitter, dismissive, pretty, and impossible to wash off. And the book, the host asked. Claire laughed. It's fiction. Come on, don't we all have a story to sell? That's when I knew. They weren't sorry. They weren't ashamed. They'd rewritten the betrayal in their own heads, turned it into a love story. A meet-cute born from bad timing and complicated friendships. And now Claire was peddling her version to the world, complete with glossy filters and a soft acoustic intro. I turned off the podcast, and I started writing again. Because the truth, the real truth, Glass Houses was only the first chapter. They took my trust. They took my comfort. But I still had the pen. And I was done being quiet. I gave them everything. My loyalty, my couch, my calendar, my silence. Now they were stealing my narrative too. Claire's podcast appearance wasn't the last, it was the first. Within 2 weeks, she launched a blog titled Heart Over Habit, where she wrote long, syrupy posts about trusting your instincts and letting go of the people who keep you small. Guess who she meant? She described me without ever using my name. Some friendships aren't meant to last, especially when one person clings to pain like it's a personality trait. Her audience, huge. Claire had always been magnetic. She knew how to package betrayal as bravery, knew how to weaponize spiritual quotes and throw just enough shade to keep herself bathed in light. And Lucas? Lucas gave an interview too to a niche podcast for conscious masculinity. He wore a cream sweater, sat in front of a wall of books I knew he hadn't read, and said things like, "Sometimes love blooms where we least expect it." And yes, there was pain. But the pain wasn't from betrayal, it was from living a lie. A lie. Our entire engagement was a lie. That trip to Vermont where we talked about baby names, the night he carried me to bed after I collapsed from grief, was that the lie? No, the lie was in the way he smiled, soft and rehearsed, as if empathy could cancel out cruelty. They weren't just together now, they were branding their relationship. Claire posted a photo of them at a local farmer's market, arms around each other with the caption, "Love doesn't ask for permission, only courage." And the comments? "You two are amazing. Proof that love finds a way. So glad you didn't let the past hold you back." The past. That's what I'd become. A past tense, an obstacle they overcame. But I wasn't done. And I sure as hell wasn't going to be remembered as the bitter woman with a blog and a bottle of wine. So I wrote, not a sequel, not yet, something deeper, something more dangerous. I started journaling the things I hadn't dared write in Glass Houses. The details I had softened, the moments I had glossed over out of some warped instinct to protect them. Like the night I found Claire's journal by mistake shoved between cookbooks. How I opened it and read her entry from 3 weeks before she and Lucas confessed. Sometimes I feel like I'm wearing her skin, like I'm trying on her life and it fits too well. Lucas laughs at my jokes like he's been waiting to hear them. I know I'm not supposed to want this, but I do. I hadn't included that. I could have, but I didn't. And now as they turn the world against me, one soft focus interview at a time, I realized something. I'd protected them because part of me still wanted to be loved. But the woman I was becoming, she didn't want love from thieves. She wanted justice. And stories when told right are a kind of justice. So I called my editor. "I want to write a new book," I said. She paused. "Sequel." "No," I said. "Testimony." She didn't ask what I meant. She just said, "Start tonight." And I did. They told me to write something less personal. More marketable. More universal. A character arc that didn't feel like vengeance and lipstick and boots. So I wrote the truth, and I made sure it bled. The new book was called Soft Animals. A quiet title. Innocuous. But every chapter cut deeper than the last. It wasn't about Lucas or Claire, not directly. There were no mugs or sweatshirts or Parisian trips. But there was a woman named Nina, and a woman named Mara, and there was a scene where Nina describes the sensation of having her soul peeled away by someone who used to brush her hair. My editor called me 3 chapters in. "Maggie, this is dangerous, it's brilliant, but brutal." "I know," I said. "So is what they did." I didn't stop this time. I didn't sugarcoat it, didn't rewrite my pain into something poetic just to make readers feel comfortable. Because this wasn't just my story anymore. Women had started writing me. Not just readers, survivors. One email said, "When I found my husband's affair was with my cousin, I stopped breathing for 2 hours. I read your book in the ER waiting room. You reminded me that betrayal doesn't make you small, it makes you aware." Another said, "My mother left my father for our neighbor when I was 9. Everyone told me to stay out of grown folks' business." Your words were the first time I felt seen. I saved every message, printed them, kept them in a red folder on my desk. Because for every Claire building a brand off betrayal, there's a woman in a locked bathroom whispering to herself, "It wasn't my fault." I wrote for her. The book took 6 months. By then, glass houses had become a phenomenon. It was being optioned for a limited series. The actress attached to play me sent me a note saying she cried while reading it. Claire and Lucas were still together, still posting, still branding. They'd launched a couples workshop called Rooted Reconnection. They toured bookstores that sold my novel. I smiled when I saw the photos, because I knew something they didn't. You can't rebrand your way out of being a villain in someone else's origin story. Soft Animals went to my publisher in February. By April, it hit shelves. By May, it hit 1-1 again. And this time, I did tell someone. I told the woman I met in group therapy. Her name was Sasha. She wore combat boots with floral skirts and had a laugh that sounded like a dare. She was the first person I'd let into my apartment since Lucas left. She read Soft Animals in 2 days, cried on my couch, then looked at me and said, "You're not broken, you're volcanic." No one had ever said that to me before. Lucas said I was a little too intense. Claire said I loved too loudly. But Sasha, she said they underestimated you. And now you're writing the blueprint for other women to crawl out. And she was right. I wasn't the girl crying into a wine glass anymore. I was the woman who held a mirror to her betrayers, and then used that mirror to light a fire. I thought the story ended when he left. But I was wrong. Because betrayal doesn't just close a chapter, it infects the next one. It shows up in the way you flinch when the door opens, even if it's just the wind. In the way you hesitate before telling someone your favorite song, like it might be used against you later. In the way you begin to narrate your own life, always a step ahead, always anticipating the twist. I lived like that for a year, waiting for the next shoe to drop. But no one tells you what to do when the silence finally comes, when there are no more texts, no more interviews, no more Instagram captions thinly veiled as war declarations. Lucas and Claire had gone quiet. I'd heard rumors, of course, that the workshop flopped, that Claire tried to crowdfund a memoir that never materialized, that Lucas moved back in with his sister, but I didn't confirm any of it. Not because I didn't care, because I didn't need to anymore. The first real proof I had that I was healing came one morning when I saw a photo of the two of them at some event. Lucas looked tired. Claire's smile didn't reach her eyes. I felt nothing. No rush of nausea, no pang in my gut, no urge to call Sasha or pour a drink or write another scathing scene. Just stillness. And in that stillness, I found the freedom to write something new. Not about betrayal, not about loss. About after. The book was called The Quiet Shift, and this one had nothing to do with Lucas, or Claire, or even Sasha. It was about a woman who moves into a small, crumbling cottage on the edge of a foggy town where no one knows her name. She plants things. She keeps bees. She learns how to sit with herself without expecting applause or apology. It wasn't the kind of story that got adapted into prestige TV, but it was the one I needed to tell. And for the first time in a long time, the story didn't have a villain, only a woman learning to live without one. Sasha and I read drafts together at my kitchen table. She would pause, sometimes place her hand over mine and say, "This is what healing sounds like." I'd nod, not always sure I believed her, but willing to try. One night while reading the final chapter aloud, she stopped me mid-sentence. "Do you realize," she said, "that you haven't said his name in the entire manuscript?" I blinked. She was right. No Lucas, no Claire, no ghosts, just me. A name on a cover, a woman at peace. That was the night I kissed Sasha for the first time. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't forbidden. It was soft, warm, real. And when she pulled away, she smiled and said, "You're not the woman they left behind anymore." I smiled back. "No," I said. "I'm the woman who kept writing." The invitation came in a cream envelope. Embossed. Pretentious. Claire always had a flair for dramatics. Even her betrayal was choreographed like a stage play act. 1, stolen glances, act 2, whispered secrets, act 3, my life in ruins, while she twirled across Paris with my ex. Now 2 years later, she wanted me at their wedding. The card was addressed by hand. Not printed, not mass-mailed. It was deliberate the way you send a message with lipstick instead of words. Inside it read, "We believe in full circle moments. We hope you'll be there to witness ours. With love, Claire and Lucas." Full circle. That phrase clung to my skin like humidity. I didn't respond. Not right away. I tucked the envelope in a drawer and went for a walk. Sasha was away that weekend visiting her sister, and I needed the quiet to decide whether I felt anger or something worse. Curiosity. What kind of woman invites the person she betrayed to her wedding? What kind of man lets her? Part of me, the one still holding a bruised ego, wanted to show up in a red dress and say something cruel during the toasts. Another part of me, the writer, wanted to attend just to watch them, to see how they told their story, to count how many of my old memories they'd painted over with theirs. But mostly I wanted to prove to myself that I could stand in the same room as them and feel nothing. I RSVP'd yes. Sasha was surprised. "You sure?" she asked, curling beside me on the couch. "I need to see what the ending looks like," I said. "Whose ending?" she asked gently. I didn't answer. I wore a navy jumpsuit. Minimal makeup. No heels, just the boots I wore during the Glass House's book tour. The ones that made me feel grounded. Like I had walked through fire and come out blistered but upright. The venue was exactly what I expected: wine barrels, fairy lights, strings of overdone acoustic covers of indie songs. I recognized a few faces from our old lives, mutual friends, ex-friends. The ceremony began with the usual hollow vows. Lucas said something about finding peace in the unexpected. Claire cried in a way that made sure her mascara didn't run. When they kissed, the audience clapped. I did not. At the reception, someone tapped my shoulder. It was Greg, Claire's ex, the one she left before moving in with us. "Didn't expect to see you here," he said, raising an eyebrow. I shrugged, curiosity or maybe closure. He laughed once, soft and bitter. That's what I told myself when I came to her last birthday party. Then I remembered she doesn't close things. She just leaves them unfinished and pretends that's poetic. We shared a drink. We didn't talk about the past, not directly, but we did watch Claire and Lucas twirl under the lights like they were auditioning for the next lie. I left before the cake, and as I walked to my car, I felt it again. Not rage, not sadness, just a shift. I didn't need revenge anymore. I didn't need their regret. I just needed space. And as I drove home, windows down, music low, I realized they may have stolen my peace once, but I took it back paragraph by paragraph, and I wrote a better love story than they ever could. The truth didn't set me free. Writing it did. Telling the story, all of it, rewrote the shape of my grief. Not into something pretty, not into something I could frame and hang above the mantel, but into something mine, something I could live with. There's a myth people love that when you tell your story, the pain disappears, that by naming it, you make it smaller. But sometimes naming it makes it realer, heavier. It stretches out in your chest and asks to be fed. And if you're not careful, you start writing for the pain instead of through it. That's what I was afraid of. So after Soft Animals and the wedding and the inevitable follow-up emails, was that really about Claire? Are you still in touch with Lucas? Did they invite you to the honeymoon too? I disappeared. I deleted all my social media. I told my agent I needed 6 months. I stopped checking rankings, reviews, royalty reports. I stopped measuring my healing by the number of readers nodding along. I went still. I took Sasha to the mountains. We rented a cabin. No Wi-Fi, no espresso, no mirrors big enough to see more than your own face. We spent our mornings hiking, our afternoons writing, and our nights wrapped around each other like prayer. One night, as snow tapped at the windows and the fireplace flickered like it had a secret, Sasha turned to me and asked, "What would you write if no one ever read it?" I stared at the ceiling for a long time before answering. I'd write about the woman I was before I learned to shrink. She smiled, "Then start there." So I did. Not a book, not yet. Just scenes, fragments, a list of the lies I had once mistaken for love. If someone really loves you, they'll choose you. Friends don't betray each other unless something was already broken. Forgiveness is more noble than anger. You have to earn your peace. All lies. Peace isn't earned, it's taken back. And betrayal doesn't require your permission to exist. It just needs access. So I wrote about a woman who gives herself permission to take up space, to feel rage, to stay angry until the anger cools into clarity. I didn't write it for an audience. I wrote it for me. Sasha would read over my shoulder, sometimes humming softly, sometimes crying without telling me why. And one morning, over burnt toast and bitter coffee, she said, "You don't owe them forgiveness." I looked up. Not even to be free. She shook her head. You're already free, you just forgot how to enjoy it. And she was right. I had confused closure with contact, freedom with detachment, healing with performance. I didn't need to prove anything anymore. Not to readers, not to Claire, not to Lucas, not even to the little voice in my head still asking, what could you have done differently? The answer was nothing. I had loved the wrong people. They had chosen each other, and I had written the hell out of it. That's the story. And now, I was finally ready to write something else. Closure didn't come like a storm. It came like laundry, folded, quiet, mundane. One Tuesday, I was standing in the kitchen, folding warm towels, humming a song I didn't even realize I remembered when it hit me. I hadn't thought about Lucas in 3 days. Not once. Not even in passing. Not even in a sideways glance of memory. I hadn't pictured Claire's smirk or imagined what she might post next. I hadn't wondered if they were still together, if they fought, if they secretly regretted everything. I didn't care. I was humming, folding, living. It startled me more than it should have, the normalcy of peace. I had spent so long battling, defending, bleeding in print that I didn't know how to exist without the edge. I stood there holding a hand towel, stunned by my own stillness. Then I laughed. Not politely, not for show. I laughed like someone who finally realized the punchline of a joke they'd been living inside for years. They were gone. The pain was gone. And I was still here. Still writing, still building, still dancing barefoot in the kitchen when Sasha played that one Florence song too loud on Sunday mornings. That afternoon, I pulled out the red folder, the one with all the letters from women who had read Glasshouse's Soft Animals, and now The Quiet Shift. One letter stood out. It came from a woman named Julianne, late 40s, divorced, a mother of 3. Your books made me realize I wasn't just sad, I was erased. My story had been replaced by someone else's, but reading yours gave me mine back. That was it. That was it. That's what betrayal does. It's not just the heartbreak, it's the erasure, the way someone else rewrites your memories, your worth, your voice, until you're just a side character in a life you built. But story's their resurrection, and I was done telling mine in whispers. That week, I signed a deal to teach a storytelling workshop, reclaiming the narrative, writing through the fire. Not on a book tour, not on a stage with dramatic lighting. In a small library in upstate New York. 10 women, 1 room, 2 days. No recording, no social media. Just notebooks, pens, tea, and truth. The first day I opened with a single sentence. We're not here to write about betrayal, we're here to write past it. And something in the room shifted. They came with stories, some still raw, some numbed over. One woman whispered about her husband and her sister, another about her pastor. One cried as she described watching her daughter choose her ex-husband's new wife as a maid of honor. We didn't offer solutions, we offered space. And in that space, I saw versions of myself every stage, from rage to retreat, from numb to rising. And I finally understood. The story wasn't about what Lucas and Claire did. It was about what I did after. I met someone at the library. But this story isn't about him. His name was Theo. He was kind, smelled like cedarwood and old books. He ran the local reading hour for single dads and always brought extra snacks for kids with forgetful parents, as he gently called them. He didn't know who I was not at first. Hadn't read Glasshouses or Soft Animals. Thought The Quiet Shift was quietly brilliant, but didn't realize the woman behind the checkout desk was its author until someone else mentioned it. He treated me like a person, not a story. And maybe that's why I liked him. He didn't ask about Claire, or Lucas, or Paris. He asked what I liked on my toast, whether I'd always been a morning person, if I preferred fountain pens or mechanical pencils when I wrote. He never made me explain the scars, and that more than anything felt sacred. We talked over tea for weeks before anything happened, not even a kiss, just lingering conversations that wrapped around us like wool scarves. I told Sasha about him. She smiled, not sad, not bitter, just knowing. You're allowed, she said, to be happy, even if your life was once on fire. I'm not sure I remember how I whispered. You don't have to remember, she said, you just have to allow. So I allowed. Dinner with Theo turned into walks. Walks turned into porch reading. Porch reading turned into a slow kiss that didn't demand anything except presence. He didn't rush me, didn't try to overwrite the chapters that came before him. He just asked one question quietly one evening as we watched the wind ripple across the lake. Do you ever think you'll write about after? I thought about that for a long time, because I had written about betrayal, and loss, and healing, but not after. Not the strange, sacred space where peace isn't loud, it's subtle. It doesn't announce itself with fireworks. It shows up as warm coffee and sleeping without grinding your teeth. So I told him yes. Yes, I would write after. And I started that night. It wasn't a novel, not a memoir either. It was fragments of joy, of quiet, of tiny unnoticed victories, like being able to walk past a song they used to love and not wince, like folding laundry without sobbing into a towel, like watching someone else fall in love with your words, not because of the pain, but because of the way you survived it, and slowly after became the most beautiful part of the story. 'Cause after is where I finally met myself. Claire emailed me again. Subject line, a long time coming. It had been over a year since the wedding, nearly 2 since Glass Houses went viral. I hadn't heard from her directly since the RSVP, and honestly, I had hoped that chapter had closed. But curiosity is a cruel thing. I opened it. Maggie, I know I'm probably the last person you want to hear from. I've started this message a dozen times and deleted every version. I'm not writing to defend myself. I know what I did. I don't expect forgiveness. But I read The Quiet Shift, and for the first time, I saw myself not as the heroine I always believed I was, but as the interruption in someone else's piece. You didn't just tell your story, you held up a mirror, and I flinched. If there's ever a time you want to talk, not to make things right, just to acknowledge they were wrong, I'm here. Claire. There was no sign-off, no heart emoji, no selfie, no subtle dig, just truth. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel the familiar gut punch when her name appeared. I didn't feel rage, or grief, or even the twisted satisfaction of her regret. I felt distance. Not the kind you measure in miles. The kind that says we're not in the same story anymore. I closed the laptop. I didn't respond. Not because I was punishing her, because I didn't need to explain who I'd become to the person who helped destroy who I was. Later that evening, I sat on the porch with Theo. The air smelled like rain, and a quiet thunder hummed at the edge of the sky. I read the email to him. He listened. Didn't offer advice, just nodded once and said, "Sometimes closure is choosing not to open the door again." I smiled. Because he was right. Claire would always be part of my past, woven into the earliest chapters of heartbreak, betrayal, and the fire that made me burn down the old version of myself. But I didn't need to reopen the ruins. Not when I had rebuilt the house. Not when the lights were finally on. And someone was sitting beside me not because of who I used to be, but because of who I chose to become. I poured us each a glass of wine. To peace. To stillness. To after, and I raised mine a little higher, to the women who've been erased and wrote themselves back in bold. I signed a reader's book and she burst into tears. Not the kind of pretty movie-ready tears. No, these were the raw gut-level sobs that make your spine ache just hearing them. She clutched soft animals to her chest like it was a life jacket. "I left him because of this," she whispered, voice cracking. I read it in secret. Every night in the bathroom while he slept beside me. It was like you were telling my story before I knew how to. I stood there, Sharpie still in hand, heart pounding, because I remembered being her. Hiding my pain in quiet corners. Searching for proof that I wasn't overreacting, that what I felt mattered. I reached for her hand, held it. "You weren't crazy," I said. "You were awake." The line behind her was patient. No one rushed us. That's the thing I've learned when women see another woman finally speak aloud. What they've only dared whisper, they don't interrupt. They witness. After the signing, I sat in my car, hands trembling on the steering wheel. Not from nerves, but from the quiet weight of responsibility. I wasn't just writing stories anymore. I was handing back voices. And not just to strangers. To myself. I'd been slowly writing something new, a hybrid of sorts. Half memoir, half manual. A guide for women like me. Women who had been stolen from in subtle, socially acceptable ways. Through manipulation. Through harmless flirtation. Through being told you're overreacting until you start believing your own silence is the noble thing. I called it She Knew Anyway. Because even before the confession, the Instagram photo, the ugly truth we know. We always know. That project felt different. It didn't bleed like glass houses. It didn't smolder like soft animals. It didn't ache like The Quiet Shift. It healed. Because this wasn't just my arc anymore. It was a map. A lighthouse for anyone adrift in betrayal's storm, still squinting at the horizon. For proof that they weren't imagining it all. One night I printed the draft and laid every page across the living room floor. Sasha came in, stepped carefully between the sheets and said, "You're not just telling the truth anymore. You're teaching it." And that was the moment I realized Lucas and Claire didn't break me. They began me. Their betrayal lit the match. But I built the fire. And I would keep building, not to burn, but to warm. To remind every woman reading, you're not too much. You're not too sensitive. You're not dramatic. You're aware. And you get to write your ending. This is the last chapter and the first one I wrote without crying. No shaking hands, no red-rimmed eyes, no trembling over the keyboard like the words might explode on contact. Just quiet. Just me, awake before the sun. Coffee cooling beside the laptop. The porch door open, letting in the kind of breeze that makes you believe in clean slates. I used to think closure meant justice. That one day Claire would apologize publicly. That Lucas would show up at a reading, eyes full of regret, whispering, "You were right. I was a coward." But justice doesn't always come dressed as apology. Sometimes it looks like a woman waking up in her own skin and realizing she no longer needs permission to take up space. Sometimes it looks like a bookshelf filled with your name. Sometimes it looks like silence, the kind that isn't empty but earned. I haven't spoken to Lucas in nearly 3 years. Claire sent one last email months ago. Said she and Lucas were no longer together. She didn't say why. She didn't ask for anything. She ended it with, "I hope your writing keeps helping people." It does. But more than that, it keeps helping me. The woman who once questioned her worth when a man walked away, she's gone. The woman who once measured friendship by how long someone stayed, even when it hurt, gone. I kept the sweatshirt Claire wore that day on the porch. Washed it, folded it, put it in a donation bag. Someone else wears it now, I'm sure. Someone who doesn't know its story. Just a soft green hoodie that smells like clean cotton. That's how healing works. It lets you stop assigning meaning to everything that once gutted you. It lets you let go without ceremony. Tonight I'll finish edits on She Knew Anyway. Tomorrow I'll teach another workshop in a town I've never been to, where women will sit in a circle and confess things they've never said aloud. And next month I'll start a new book. Not about betrayal, not about grief, not even about healing. About joy. Not because I'm done telling hard stories, but because I'm ready to tell true ones. The kind where the woman doesn't just survive. She builds. She thrives. She laughs. And when the wind brushes her hair across her face, she doesn't flinch like someone watching the past creep back. She closes her eyes and lets it blow through. This isn't a happy ending. It's just a beginning with nothing left to prove. Thank you for listening.